Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Molly Hudson. Thank you for joining us. As classes begin in the upcoming days or weeks, Arizona schools are taking different approaches to the recent rise in COVID cases. The Kyrene School District announced they will require face coverings indoors at school campuses and district facilities beginning today. The district announced the change following a new CDC and Maricopa County Department of Public Health guidance about quarantine and isolation periods. The guidance says students are able to go back to school sooner after an isolation period, but must wear a face covering. A few miles to the north, the Scottsdale Unified School District also plans on changing their facial covering policy as classes get underway. But rather than continue requiring masks, they will now strongly recommend them. It was a stressful end to the holiday week for many travelers, spending hours waiting in airports hoping to get a flight out. And that includes those departing from Phoenix's Sky Harbor International Airport. To mitigate these frustrations, United Airlines says they will temporarily increase pay for eligible pilots as an incentive while the COVID-19 pandemic continues to wreak havoc on the travel industry. The company reached a deal with the pilots union to pay 3.5 times normal wages to pilots who pick up extra trips through Monday and triple pay for flights between Tuesday and January 29th. Reuters reported Spirit's flight attendants are receiving double pay on any work through January 4th, according to their union. Donald Trump is returning to Arizona for a rally near Florence. The former president plans to speak at the Country Thunder Festival grounds on January 15th. Arizona has been at the center of Trump's effort to cast doubt on his loss to President Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Trump was last in Arizona on July 24th when he made a wide variety of false claims about the election during a rally in Phoenix. Florence is in the heart of Pinal County, a Republican stronghold that Trump won by 17 percentage points in the 2020 election. As moviegoers return to the theaters, superhero movies have resumed their dominance at the box office. The 3 highest-grossing movies so far this year have all been based on Marvel Comics. But does the popularity of comic book movies and TV shows translate to sales for actual comic books? Cronkite News reporter Rob Winder visited one local retailer to find out.
Phoenix resident Salvador Maciel has recently rekindled his love of an old hobby.
I was into comics before comic movies got really big. I'm just recently getting back into comics. I took a break for about maybe 6-7 years.
And he says the proliferation of comic book movies has played a small part in bringing him back.
All the excitement with all the Marvel movies got me just wanting to get back into it.
Comic book store owner Ken Brown says those movies have made a lot of people excited about comic books.
People wanted to see where those comics were influencing the movies, and it started really impacting the market in a positive way.
Despite the challenges of the pandemic, that market grew to $1.28 billion in 2020. According to industry analysts. And it also benefits from comic book-based TV shows. Brown says there's been a bump in sales for Hawkeye Comics since the release of that series on Disney+.
Those comics are selling just as well as the TV shows are doing well.
And it's not just the Marvel comics that get a boost from TV and movies. When The Umbrella Academy debuted on Netflix, for instance, publisher Dark Horse Comics was initially overwhelmed by the demand for those graphic novels.
At the moment the show came out, we had about, what would have amounted to 3 years worth of stock on each of the books. Seemed like, boy, we're all set. It was gone, within weeks.
Maciel says fans of the Marvel and DC shows who become interested in the comics should also give these other properties a try.
The world of comics is more than just superheroes.
That's not to say he doesn't love the Marvel superheroes. In fact, he says he has a little catching up to do on the movies. And then on the comics.
I'm curious about the Eternals. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm pretty sure after watching the movie, I'm going to want to go buy the reprints of the old stuff.
And there's still plenty of the old stuff left to inspire your next favorite movie. In Glendale, Rob Winder, Cronkite News.
And fans of The Umbrella Academy will have more of that story to look forward to. Netflix has teased the release of Season 3 in 2022. And Mark Bernardi of Dark Horse Comics says more Umbrella Academy comics are coming as well. Next, we take a look back at stories about space in Arizona's research with NASA.
ASU is going to the stars with NASA in a mission to explore an unusual asteroid flying between Mars and Jupiter. From our Los Angeles bureau, Cronkite News reporter Jude Binkley tells us about the mission.
The Psyche mission is preparing to journey to a metal world. That's the slogan NASA and ASU are using to explore an asteroid that's about the size of Massachusetts. Known as Psyche, the asteroid is unique. It's composed of metal and may have been the core of another planet. NASA believes this will help us learn about how our Earth was formed.
I want to learn something about the materials that make our rocky planets. So Psyche might be part of the metal core of a little planetesimal that got broken apart in collisions, in which case it's the only way that humans are ever going to see the metal core of anybody, because we're never going to see the Earth. But if this is what Psyche is, this will be the only one like it in the solar system.
The mission was selected in 2017 as part of NASA's Discovery program. In total, 800 people are working together on the expedition. The spacecraft is being built here at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. In its final stages of assembly, the craft will then be put through a series of tests: vibration, electromagnetic, thermal vacuum, to make sure it can handle the launch and deep space.
We are in the fastest moving, most dynamic time of this project, because this is what's referred to as a planetary launch, and its timing is all coordinated with where Mars is going to be and where the other planets and bodies will be. We have one shot, a window of opportunity, about a month or so long, in August, that we have to launch.
After launch, the spacecraft will travel through space with electric-powered acceleration. The trip will take 3 years to reach Psyche, and they'll have the help of Mars to get there.
Getting to Psyche, we need to do what's called a Mars flyby. Basically, we are going to target going towards Mars, and we're going to catch up to Mars, and we're going to skin right by it. What that does is, it's a fairly big planet. It's got a lot of gravity, right? We don't want to land on Mars, but if you come up, the gravity will start to pull it and accelerate us, and then will slingshot us right around.
After reaching Psyche, the spacecraft will orbit it for 2 years. The craft will be taking images that will be sent to ASU and immediately shared with the world.
Because we really believe as a team that space exploration is for everyone on Earth. And one thing that we've developed is a pipeline such that when we get the images from the cameras back from Psyche, they'll come right to ASU, and we'll have them on the internet for anyone in the world to see within a half hour. And so the whole world will get to look at Psyche at the same time as the team.
The mission is less than a year away from takeoff. After it's completed all its phases at JPL, the spacecraft will then be shipped to Kennedy Space Center in Florida for a launch in August of next year. In Pasadena, Jude Binkley, Cronkite News.
Twice a day, every day, and all at the same time, weather balloons are launched across the world. They give scientists valuable information about what's going on weather-wise and what it means for us. Evan List tells us how this process works for Phoenix.
During the monsoon season in Arizona, it isn't uncommon to see massive thunderclouds towering to different heights in the sky. Some reach the top of the troposphere and spread out horizontally, while others only get to the middle before dying out. Scientists at the Salt River Project in Tempe launched our weather balloons during the summer to understand what's happening at these different levels of the atmosphere.
This is Bo Sfoma, and I'm with Salt River Project, and we're about to launch a weather balloon.
As soon as SRP meteorologist Bo Sfoma gets approval from Phoenix Sky Harbor,
all right, we can launch it.
It's launch time.
Great. Probably could give it a little more.
Once the weather balloon is up, it starts collecting data about its surroundings using an attached device called a radio sonde.
Measures temperature, how much water vapor in the air, that's humidity, pressure, and then as it moves with the wind vertically, it measures wind speed and direction.
Outside of the summer, Flagstaff and Tucson National Weather Service offices are Arizona's exclusive locations for radiosonde launches. However, for Phoenix, SRP steps in during the hottest months with local balloon launches that provide valuable information. This was particularly helpful during our very active monsoon season.
There were a lot of thunderstorms at many times of the day, but particularly the ones at night are important because it's when they usually happen. And then we launched the weather balloon the next morning and can see how those thunderstorms impacted the atmosphere and how that might impact the high temperature that day.
The data helps SRP figure out efficient power supply operations. It also helps the National Weather Service.
That helps us a lot to get a sense, certainly in the summertime, when you're really trying to figure out thunderstorms, what kind of instability do we have? In other words, what kind of potential is there for thunderstorm development?
As the SRP weather balloon program wraps up with the end of monsoon season, so may the above average rainfall in Arizona.
We're looking like we're definitely going into a La Nina situation.
Researchers at the University of Arizona are refurbishing a part of Biosphere 2 to see what life might look like when humans live on the surface of the moon or Mars. Cronkite News reporter Nick Shesky sat down with team leaders to discuss the SAM project and living on the red planet.
30 years ago, the test module near Tucson was home to the original 8 biospherians who tried to live completely sealed from the outside world in a bioregenerative experiment with all of their air, water, and food produced and recycled by plants. But now, the module is home to a new project, looking to the future of our species.
There's something really powerful about becoming an interplanetary species and bringing life with us where we go to explore.
In 2019, the test module had no experiments and no purpose. It laid at Biosphere 2 unused and abandoned. That was until Kai Stotz spotted it when he was taking a tour of Biosphere 2.
But it had been grown over, and there's weeds and cactus and rats, and both dead and alive. and I said to John, I said, what is this? What are you going to do with it? He says, well, that's the original prototype. We haven't done anything with it for almost 30 years. And he says, if you can find use for it, it's yours.
Stotz found a purpose and named it SAM, a space analog for the moon and Mars. Think of an analog as a station that sort of simulates what it would be like to live on a foreign planet. Stotz and the rest of his team spent most of this year refurbishing the test module into a Mars analog that they hope can lead to lots of findings about living on the Martian surface.
When you put somebody into a sealed environment, it changes the game across the board. It's no longer just camping. You're actually inside of this building, and everything you do, every breath you take, everything you drink, everything you eat, all of that stays in the environment.
Last June, Stotz, Trent Tresh, and 3 others were sealed inside SAM for over 4 hours to measure things like temperature, pressure, humidity, and carbon dioxide levels. One of the core objectives of SAM is to be the first Mars analog to clean air not by using CO2 scrubbers, but by solely using plants.
We're not going to want to rely entirely on mechanical devices. We're going to want to transition into functional greenhouses, which are called controlled environments. And long-term, we want to grow our own food on Mars. And why not have the plants draw down that CO2 as well? They need CO2. We produce CO2. It's a good relationship.
Now, SAM is not the only astronaut analog out there. There have been a dozen astronaut analogs all across the world on every continent. But none of them have tried to go to the extremes of a completely sealed environment like SAM is trying to do.
Analog astronautics are, they're popping up everywhere. People want to get out there and train to be astronauts. They want to create tools to be used on their planets, and they need facilities to test those things in with proper research methods. So I see SAM as a huge springboard to support the future of humanity in space.
30 years after the original Biospherians left the test module, Stotz, Tresh, and the rest of the team are daring to once again seal themselves away from the outside world to show that maybe one day humans on Mars will live like the Biospherians tried to 30 years ago. If humans ever settle on the Martian surface, it might not look identical to the SAM project, but there is no doubt in the minds of Stotz and Tresh that SAM will be a huge help in sustaining settlements on the moon and Mars for a long time. In the studio, Nick Shesky, Cronkite News.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. Next on Break It Down, as musicals are remade into movies, we take a look at the issue of representation. We break it all down next. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
Stream the best of PBS on any device with the PBS Video app. All your favorite drama, history, science, news, and documentaries, all in one place. Watch your PBS station live or catch up on the shows you missed. Discover new favorites from PBS and locally produced shows from your station.
Sign in and start streaming today.
Your favorite member benefit is getting better and bigger.
This is wonderful.
Over the next year, Passport is adding new shows and doubling the number of episodes for you to stream.
They give us all that they've got.
From your favorite cooking and travel series.
Even the stairs are breathtaking.
To history specials and award-winning documentaries. Better and bigger.
That really is the fun part.
Stream on any device with Passport on the PBS Video app.
What you get from Washington Week that you will not get anywhere else are the best and the brightest reporters from different media companies, and they're able to have a real conversation about things that are happening in Washington and around the country. But it's also a show about issues that are relevant to different communities. How do you think that, as the moderator, I feel this deep responsibility to bring in those other perspectives so that people understand how power and politics impact their daily lives.
Friday nights at 7 on Arizona PBS.
Cronkite News provides students at ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism with the opportunity to gain real-world experience in the newsroom. At Cronkite News, our students produce professional content for audiences by taking on all roles, whether they be reporting, anchoring, producing, or studio production. Each department gives students first-hand professional newsroom experience. For more information, visit cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
Every day I wake up, my first thought is, how can I serve this community?
The biggest hurdle was not taking PTSD personally.
Would you welcome, please, the amazing.
Everybody that watches this, they say that I am the greatest that they've ever seen.
Hey, I'm Rick Steves. You know, I don't go anywhere without my passport. And now, thanks to PBS Passport, you can travel with me and watch all 10 seasons of Rick Steves Europe and all my travel specials. This exclusive streaming service is just for our members. Not only can you see all my shows, but you can see thousands of hours of your favorite public television shows. Become a member today and get your passport.
Break It Down is brought to you in part by Mayo Clinic and viewers like you.
Jillian, I remember reading your book's introduction, and there is a section that chronicles your experience as a kid watching West Side Story, the 1961 award-winning film. It's been a few years since you published your book and 60 years since West Side Story hit the theaters. And once again, here we are talking about West Side Story. And I'm very happy that you're here to help me break it down, because there's an increasing trend of musicals transitioning into the big screen. But first, let's situate West Side Story from a historical standpoint. Why is it relevant to talk about West Side Story in 2021?
Sure. West Side Story is a musical that keeps recirculating. It originally was a Broadway play, that was released in 1957, had a number of runs on Broadway. And then there was, the now famous classic, many would consider to be a classic film in 1961, the adaptation of West Side Story. And now most recently, we have coming out in a few months, the long-awaited, new version of the West Side Story film. It is, West Side Story there are a lot of dimensions to, thinking about West Side Story. On the one hand, it has been viewed, both the theatrical version and the film version, as aesthetically, very powerful, It's certainly, it's award-winning. There's a reason why it keeps coming back from an aesthetic perspective. And then, of course, in terms of narrative, right, the storyline and issues of representation, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding it, right? One, because of the casting, and thinking about, like the roles of Anita have always been played by Puerto Rican women, but that's like, of course, one of the more stereotypical roles within West Side Story. And then, of course, there have been a number of, Anglo-white actors playing Puerto Rican roles, and that's been at the tension. And of course, too, there are larger questions of, what is the storyline here? And how does it still hold relevance today for new audiences?
Yeah, and of course, this is like a really successful formula, like Romeo and Juliet kind of formula. And the issue with the castings is always, being in center stage, which is really interesting. It was an issue in the first, the first time that they did the film in 1961, and it's been an issue again. But the interesting thing is that besides West Side Story, another musical hit the big screen, also about Latinos and Latinas in New York, and it's Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights, right? Based on Chiara Alegria Uda's work. And In the Heights tells the story of a New York City Dominican neighborhood, Washington Heights, right? So in 1 year, we'll have 2 stories about Latinos and Latinas in New York narrated through music. Is this yet again another instance of tropicalizations of Latinos and Latinas?
I mean, on the one hand, absolutely, it is exciting, right? Anytime that we have Latino-oriented, Latino-censored stories out there, it is exciting. I think that these are 2 very different kinds of narratives, though. So, like, in the case of West Side Story, that is about tensions, right, within a neighborhood in New York City, and it is very much about, race relations in the 1950s in New York City. On the other hand, In the Heights is much more Latino-centered within a Latino, ethnic enclave, if you will. And, there were more writers, producers involved that are Latino. So to me, they're different stories. And certainly I would say, if we want to talk about tropicalization and thinking about that as like a trope, right, or a way in which Latinos have been represented visually, like, just basic things like, for example, bright colors, but in terms of sound, right, and that's so important with the musical, right, thinking about the kinds of music that they're drawing on, and, what most mainstream viewers might see as, Latin music, which to most people that means like tropical music, even though, of course, Latin music encompasses a lot of different kinds of genres. So I think that there is an element there of tropicalization. I think, it's a very unique moment that we're seeing that in terms of 2, film versions of musicals that are centered on Latinos. I think that people will be tuning in for different reasons. I think, you'll have older audiences, both Latino and non-Latino, with West Side Story tuning in to see, watching very carefully, right? To see what this re-envisioning looks like. Younger audiences who are not as familiar, tuning in. And then within the Heights, I think that draws on its own fandom in and of itself, but also will introduce that musical, I think, to audiences who otherwise have not had access, just because it's not as, widely spread as West Side Story, who haven't been able to see it, on a live theater. But yeah, so it remains to be seen, how much tropicalization will really be happening here.
And I have one final question, and my question is, what is the value of retelling stories that have been told, right? In the Heights, of course, people that have been to the musical know what the story is about. Now it's transitioning to the big screen. Same thing with West Side Story, told over and over again in several versions, several revisions of it. And I know that we are talking about musicals, but I can think of, other ways in which Latinos experiences, their stories has been retold. There is a growth of Latinx versions of shows, right? And shows like One Day at a Time, The Baker and the Beauty, and Party of Five, right? What does that reveal about the industry and about the representations of Latinos in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is tapping into a larger trend that we're especially seeing in television. Certainly, with the shows that you mentioned, like Party of Five, One Day at a Time. I'm also thinking about You know, the reboot of Roswell, which is Roswell, New Mexico. This is centered on, you know, the Latina as a protagonist in that particular series, or the Charmed reboot, where the sisters are now Latina sisters. So that's definitely a trend. You know, and I will say, on the one hand, you know, there are interesting sort of creative decisions made there in terms of retelling those stories. And certainly, you know, there was a huge fandom around One Day at a Time, for example, really that indicates that that was a really useful way to be able to tell a number of different kinds of Latino stories, right? Because that was an ensemble cast, which gave them the opportunity to do that. But at the same time, I will say that I want to caution us too, because I also think it's really important to make spaces for original, you know, Latino stories, right? Viewers also want to see, you know, those kinds of narratives happening in both film and television. And, you know, and there are many Latino writers out there, talented, who have really, you know, interesting, you know, new kinds of content to offer viewers. And so I think it's important that in the industry, that space is also made.
And I totally agree with you. And Jillian, thank you very much for helping me breaking it down. Good to see you.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
This hour of local news is made possible by contributions from the Friends of PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you. If you have comments about Arizona PBS News, please contact us at one of the addresses on your screen. Thank you.